Hello there, welcome to part 2 of my tutorial series for Rimworld Biotech. I'm Icon and this one is all about the Mechanitor class. In part 1 I was talking about genes and xenotypes, link to the playlist is in the description box, and this time it's all about the mechanoids. I'm going to cover the mechanics, how to make new mechanoids, what to take care of, what you should prepare, the usual entire program. If you have a particular question, check out the timestamps down below. I did my best to summarize that video in good and meaningful chapters. With that being said, the first thing that I want to talk about are the basics of being a Mechanitor, what do they do, and the basic technologies and buildings to get the ball rolling. Before I get into that, a quick shout out to the support links down there. There's Patreon, PayPal, and Buy Me a Coffee as means to show your direct support to this channel. As a free content creator, I can use all the help that I can get. A big thanks to all the supporters out there who are already supporting the channel. Thanks. Enough of the ads, let's get into the meat and bone of this video. First things first, what's a Mechanitor? Simply said, it's a dude who controls mechanoids. And the Mechanitor status is linked to the mechlink item. A mechlink is something that you need to acquire by adventurous means or starting with the particular background. What I did here in this video for the sake of the tutorial, I would recommend the Mechanitor start to everybody who's new to the topic and wants to find his way around, because you start with a lot of useful resources that make it easier to get into the whole Mechanitor thing. All in all, a Mechanitor needs the mechlink, the basic mech tech technology, a lot of energy and steel, and components. I would deeply recommend you to have the microelectronics technology already researched. The more, the better. So multi-analyzer is super handy, fabrication as well, because before you know what you'll be doing, you'll be needing so much energy and components, you'll be screaming for days. That's what it means to be a Mechanitor. The first buildings that you'll require are down here in the Biotech tab, and you'll need, first off, a subcore encoder and a, let me check. We also need the mech recharger, very important. It's your charging station for your mechanoids. Don't shy away from building more than one, it really comes in handy. And you also need the mech gestator. So let's see, do I have everything now? I think I forgot something. We got the basic subcore maker. No, that's everything. So that's your setup when you got the basic mech tech. The basic mech tech skill is free to acquire, and it brings you the ability to make a couple of things. Oh, I forgot the band node. That's what I'm missing. And you can craft a couple of items all at the machining table. I'll go over these as well. Let's install a machining table for that regard. So the basics of making a new mech. Let's start with that. Every mechanoid requires a subcore. The lowest tier require basic subcores. There's better ones. I'm going to talk about that in the bandwidth and course chapter a little bit more in detail. And then you need a gestator. As you see here, these are the lowest tier mechanoids. I'm going to talk about these down here a little bit more in detail later. So every mechanoid needs a subcore and a little bit of steel. So we already started with a lifter and a constructoid, and therefore we're going to make ourselves a Militor as an example of how to make a new mechanoid. In this regard, we already started out with basic subcores because of the Mechanitor background. If you wouldn't, you could make them here. 50 steel, 2 components, and then you have to slap in another 50 steel and the subcore. So one low tier mech needs 100 steel, 2 components. So after that's all set up and ordered, now we're going to call Fred to do the job. By the way, everything regarding mechs is in the Smith job. So if you're looking for the answer there, everything regarding mechanoids, smithing. So a mechanitor should always have a very high priority on smithing, if you'd ask me. So now he slapped in the materials, and now the gestator is working. It's gestating for 1.6 days. That's a pretty heavy amount of time. We're going to dev mode that through. After that time, it goes green, and then the Mechanitor has to eject the new mechanoid out in his new life, and that's your first Minotaur. This is the basic procedure that always goes like this. After the gestation process, the gestator always spits out a pile of pollutionary or polluted junk, and more about toxic pollution later in the courting chapter. But there is always a price for making your new mechanoids, and that's always toxic pollution. Okay, so every mechanoid is autonomous. They are doing their job according to their role. So the lifter does automatically carry stuff around. The constructoid does automatically construct things. You don't need to configure them in any particular way. You can draft them though, just like you can draft anybody. And they are also controllable. So a drafted mechanoid can be just ordered around like that. Also, here, the white border is the command range. As you see here, your mechanoids cannot be too far away from the Mechanitor. So let's get on into the next chapter, or we are actually right already in it. That's how to manage your mechanoids, because, you know, as you see there, there's a lot of mechanoids that you can acquire. Our man here is using only 3 of his 9 bandwidth points. Technically, I'd be able to build now 6 more mechanoids, and they'd be all wheezing around, so you better manage them. In the Mechs Rider, you can do exactly that. Here you see all the mechs that you got. You can also color them according to your own taste. Sadly, there's only a global coloring, but it is as it is. I'd be really happy if I could be coloring my mechs individually, but that's a totally different story. Here you see what the mechs are up to. Their energy, their current energy, if they are drafted or not. You can also draft them here, you see. That's a pretty useful thing. You can navigate to them and activate them. What I really recommend is put them on auto repair. If this is activated, if they are damaged, your Mechanitor will automatically go towards them and repair them. Repairs don't cost any resources except for energy. It's really cool if you don't have to worry about that. And here you see what kind of overseer they are attached to. If you have more than one Mechanitor, this comes in handy. And here's the control groups of that Mechanitor. By default, every Mechanitor has 2 control groups. So, for example, here, what I like to do is I like to put the military mechanoids into a second control group, so you can configure them differently. There's now also the work mode. If you click there, you can select how these mechanoids are supposed to act. So you can put them either on work, that's when they do autonomously whatever their role is. Escort, they follow your Mechanitor, and that's really useful to go into a fight. Keep in mind though, while they are on escort, they neglect their need for energy. So escort is only a temporary work mode. You need to turn that off, otherwise their battery will run dry. Then there's recharge, which forces them to be recharged, and dormant self-recharge, where they just shut down and gain 1% of a battery charge per day, or at least the small ones do. I don't know how it's with the larger ones. TLDR, you can manage them this way, and I'd strongly suggest you to keep your military robots, for example, dormant, because they really don't have any job until there's some fighting around, and energy is valuable. And when they are dormant, they not only consume no energy, they recharge automatically. To recharge, your mechanoids will run over to the mech recharger and do their thing. 2 things though. A mech recharger only recharges a certain amount of energy per day. When you recharge a small one, that's 50% of battery per day. So they'll stand an entire day for half of their battery. 2 days for the entire battery. You have to take that into account, that your mechanoids will have pretty long downtimes when they have to recharge. And the second thing is, mech rechargers produce waste. So more pollution. The more energy you put into them, the more pollutants you produce. Another good reason for keeping the mechs that you don't need right now dormant. So that's practically the most you need to know. I strongly recommend you to manually control your military mechs as much as possible. I tried to fight with them while they were in escort mode, which was outright crap. They were not seeking any cover, nothing, just fighting like apes. So if you want to make the job work good, draft them and handle them just like you would handle any other colonist. That's where I found the best output of my military units. Beyond that, everything works pretty automatically and you don't have to worry too much about your new mechanoid friends. So, I didn't talk at all about the characteristics of the mechanoids, and I will not deepen that topic too much out of two reasons. First off, it'll bloat the video like crazy. Second off, I consider that spoilers, and there are really cool things that I want you to discover on your own, just so you know why I'm not explaining every mechanoid type here in more detail. So, now we know how to manage our mechs. The next thing on the list is, how do we get the next technologies? So, as you see there, Mech Tech followed up by Standard Mech Tech, and I lack something. I only have these unlocked due to dev mode. You would be not able to research these until you have acquired a signal chip. So here starts the progression part. A signal chip can be acquired by defeating the Diabolus boss. When you click your Mechanitor, you see here that they can summon a mech threat now. That's a special ability of your Mechanitor. You cannot summon Diabolus because no comms console, and so on and so forth. You see there, comms console can be built via the microelectronics tech, but then it goes further. Mech band antenna and mech band dish. These buildings that you need to summon the bigger threats are locked behind these techs here. So basically, after you have unlocked standard mech tech, you can summon the next stronger boss by building the mech band antenna. Then you can unlock high mech tech, which allows you to build a mech band dish, which allows you to summon the next boss, which gives you the part which allows you to study ultra mech tech, which allows you to build frickin' neutron blaster centipedes. Cool stuff, I tells you. So that's the gist of it. We're going to go over the procedure real quick here. So we're building up a comms console, and once that thing is open, you already get the notification, summon Diabolus available. So this is not being done at the comms console. We can now summon that dude. Let's do that. You get a warning about what's going to be in the box, and then the attack will come on in. So Diabolus summoned. You get a little bit of a warning before, so you can prepare yourself for the boss fight that you just initiated. And then it doesn't really take long, and the Diabolus arrives. So you have here this guy with his 3 little Militor dudes. That's the same stuff that you got. They have a little small shotgun, and the Diabolus has a Hellsphere cannon, which is basically a souped up fire cannon that has not only fire qualities but also highly destructive explosive qualities. Easy to dodge though. I'll not spoiler more about that, except for one thing. The Diabolus has not only the Hellsphere cannon equipped, he also has a neutron blaster, a single shot neutron blaster. That's the same weapon the centipedes use, like the heavy neutron blasters, just with a single shot. Why do I emphasize that so much? You'll really have to have somebody who can withstand that. You can't just kill that thing with a higher range. You'll have to dodge bullets the entire time. Neutron blaster bullets. As a last little recommendation before I let this progression topic go, I made a really good experience with binding that dude in melee while somebody else shot there and dodging this huge Hellfire cannon. The small militars are easily killed. They really have a short range and everything. Just go for this battle once you feel yourself ready, but don't think it would be a too hard one. It is really quite easy to tackle. as soon as you know what you're doing. Basically, as soon as you have two colonists with nice guns, it's super easy. Alright, enough about that. You now know the basics of the progression. There's another cool thing to note there. After 2 days, I will be able to summon another threat. I will be able to summon the Diabolus another time. Why should I want that, you might ask yourself. So let's first get the threat done by death moding it. Cheesy, I know. Quite a resilient person, hey? So once they die, here he drops a signal chip. You now have to right-click that, and usually we would be able to study that, but we don't have a research bench, so you have to set that up first. A regular one does the trick too, but you can build up the high-tech as well. I mean, why go with a worse one? And study that, and then you got the ability to unlock the tech. But if you would be going for another fight with that, for one, you can dismantle the mechanoids, you know, there's resources to be taken. So if you go for the Diabolus, you see, shredding the mechanoids. I'll show you. This is a nice way of spawning resources, and like I said initially, the Mechanitor is extremely steel hungry, so that's a nice trick. You also get some plasteel, but you can also farm the signal chip several times. That's interesting in so far that there are lots of gear items that require those signal chips still. So there's items that you can craft that require the signal chip as a ingredient. This gives you an incentive to make these boss fights several times instead of just one time. Okay, so next chapter, bandwidths and cores. So bandwidth, I already explained the basic concept about what that is. I mean, it's pretty simple. You just can't control as many mechanoids as you have bandwidth. You get the large mech gestator later, and you also get new mechanoid types with that. So as you see here, larger mechanoids will require also more bandwidth. That's what I wanted to do. So what to do to increase your bandwidth? There are several ways of doing that. First off, you can just flat out build a band node that's 200 steel, 4 components, and a consumption of 100 power. Pretty costly, but you can tune it then to your Mechanitor of choice, and then it'll increase your bandwidth by 1 per node. So this way you could set up a farm of band nodes to increase your bandwidth. That's a little bit inefficient, and there are better ways. So if you go for the technologies, you see here with the basic mech tech, you get the ability to build yourself an air wire headset. Your basic Mechanitor starts with that. Increases the bandwidth by 3. If you go for the standard mech tech here, you see you can build yourself an array headset, which will replace the weaker one, plus 6. You can also create yourself a bandwidth backpack with 9 bandwidth. And there's a lot of other ways of increasing that. There's a control sublink to increase the amount of groups that you can manage if you have the feeling that you have not enough groups. And there's also a gestation processor. High recommendation on that, reduces the gestation time, and it's so damn important to reduce that because gestation time is damn long. You can even install 6 of these into one Mechanitor. Really, really, really big recommendation, strong item, easily to be overlooked. And then the list goes on. Here's a Mech Commander helmet doing basically the same thing as the other thing did. And you get similar items on the higher stages there. So on the high Mech Tech level, you get the Integrator Mech headset, which has 3 bandwidth more than the previous one, and so on and so forth. I think it is quite easy to understand where these things go and how it's supposed to be used. Most of the bandwidth increasers need more signal chips, power focus chips, or nanostructuring chips. So killing these bosses is something that you will not do only once, but you'll do that ideally every 2 days when you can, because you know there's just a damn lot of things that you can do with these resources. Okay, so that's about bandwidth, but what about the cores? You know, there's the basic subcore, but when you check out the other bigger mechanoids, they require standard subcores and high subcores. So to make these, we'll require a voluntary specimen. So let's add Wilbur. To produce higher quality cores, you'll require the subprobe soft scanner, which is the machine that you require to make the standard subcores. And then there's the subcore rip scanner, which, like the name implies, is a little bit more brutal and comes from one tier deeper. That's the high MechTech extractor. So the order goes like subcore encoder, subcore soft scanner, subcore rip scanner. So the thing here is the subcore soft scanner produces these cores, like I said. You first start the scanner, then it gets loaded with the necessary materials for the core. It's the same materials, just more components than before. Then it gets loaded. And when it's loaded, you press the insert person button, select the person you want to insert, gets inserted, gets extracted, takes a couple of hours. Make sure that if you do that with prisoners, you leave you put that machine somewhere where the prisoner can't escape from, and then prisoner is being hauled back into bed, and then he's suffering from scanning sickness. So scanning sickness is basically just a blocker that makes it impossible to scan you one more time for another core. You cannot put a person with scanning sickness into the scanner. You just can't. So you see here, has scanning sickness. And the rip scanner, well, I'll demonstrate, but it's basically exactly the same, with only one minor difference. It kills the person you put in there. So Mechanitor colonies have a very, very, well, good use for prisoners, because the extraction sickness that you get there is a constant debuff, and it's better to not suffer from that in the first place. So this is the way how you get your cores. Okay, next step, next question. What about that pollution? So pollution can be dealt with in many different ways. First off, as soon as they deteriorate, they pollute the ground and they release tox gas, which is pretty deadly. Polluted ground is producing toxic buildup. Basically, when the ground is polluted and a person spends time on that polluted ground, they get toxic buildup. That is not being blocked by any floors, so basically once these waste packs here dissolve in this room, staying in this room will make you suffer from toxic buildup. You also have this icon here for the pollution overlay, where you can check out whether or not there's pollution. If something is polluted, it's shown in red, but we don't have any yet. So how to deal with pollution? Several ways. First off, you can freeze those things. Once a tox pack is frozen, it won't deteriorate anymore. So the a very, well, I wouldn't call it easy, but a very direct approach to the problem would be to just freeze those suckers and have a huge tox waste dump. But before you know what's happening, you will realize that this stuff is going to rack up quite nastily. You see that low stack size of 5, you'll be managing waste a lot when you go for mechanoids. So freezing is therefore only a temporary solution. You can also burn that stuff, so it'll pollute the ground directly, so you could basically build up a waste dump, I don't know, here at the end of the map. Pack that stuff there and burn it. Keep in mind, though, the pollution keeps spreading, even though... So basically, if you burn something on polluted ground, it'll just add to the outer layers and spread wider and wider. If you'd be burning polluted stuff here and everything here would be already polluted, the pollution would just seep further and further. You cannot cheat pollution. To ultimately get rid of that stuff, there's only 2 solutions that won't pollute your map. First off, you can export it to your neighbors. You will not make friends with that. You can gifted, which will make the people quite angry at you. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is a way of getting rid of that stuff. You could also consider transport pods for the same purpose. And the other thing is you can research a, where is it at? Waste pack atomizer. The waste pack atomizer also requires the nanostructuring chip study. And here we go. It requires a nanostructuring chip, so you have to kill the strongest boss for every single atomizer. It requires also a low amount of 800 watt, and worst of all, it's also not working too fast. So all in all, these things are not too effective there, but they do the trick as good as possible. I haven't worked with them yet. It looks like they, I don't know. Do they need a hopper? Looks like. But except for me realizing that I forgot to, oh well, not that. That I forgot to take care of that. You see the gist of it there. You have to take care of that, and have to find out why that thing doesn't work. But you also feel free to drop me a comment. I really overlooked that with all the preparations. I'm sorry. So that's it about pollution. I am sure we are going to find out how that thing works sooner or later. And last now, a bit of a tips and tricks section about the things that I found out when I was fidgeting around with mechanoids. First of all, I already mentioned it, really speed up that gestation process. The larger mechs need not only one gestation cycle, but several. When you want to gestate a centipede, which you can, which is awesome, you need 6 cycles of gestation. 6. And this makes every boost in that regard extremely powerful. The second one I also mentioned, but I want to emphasize it more: farm those mechanoids whenever you can. The Diabolus is really not too powerful, and it's quite easy to take him down. The third thing, try to keep your mechanoids alive as much as possible. Yes, you have the ability to resurrect them for only 50% of their costs, but they need to gestate again. So you have to go through all that time again and again and again. Which leads me to the next point. Consider having more than one gestator. You don't really need any extra encoders or anything, but the gestators, I personally feel like it really pays off to have more than one of these installed. Think even about flicking them off, you know. The large mech gestator eats 500 watt, which is a lot of energy, but you can also decide to just turn it on when you actually need more than one gestator. This way, okay, they require quite a lot of resource to get done. 300 steel and 6 components are not a small thing, but at the same time you can double your speed, and that's really, really worth it. And the next thing that I wanted to talk about is take care of the gear for your Mechanitor. It's really important that he has these items. Also, there is a thing that I forgot to mention here, the Mech Booster. So the Mech Booster is boosting up the performance of your surrounding mechanoids. This is pretty cool if you want to boost up the mechanoids that are, for example, crafting your stuff, or where there's always heavy duty. Really use them. You can power up a lot with that, because the bonus that they get is pretty impressive. The move speed ain't impressive, but 50% global work speed extra makes a darn huge difference when it comes down to crafters. So beyond that, feel free to experiment, feel free to do whatever you see fit. Those were only a really small scope of tips and tricks from somebody who has clearly not as much experience with that mod as he would like to. And I'll be adding more of those, of course, in the time being. So feel free to add more comments, feel free to ask away, feel free to explain why this thing doesn't get loaded. I'm terribly sorry about that. Typically not really my type, but well, let's make the best of it. Also, leave me a thumbs up or a subscription if you'd like to. I'd be more than happy. There's daily content like that coming up, and do the bell thing and you'll get notified whenever I stream or a new video hits town. Besides that, I already mentioned the support links. I want to point on them once more because, you know, ads are just there to be repeated. I thank you for your time. I thank you for paying attention to this video, for supporting me, whatever. I'm really happy that you took your time. Next video will be about children and education. So feel free to tune on in there. Check out the playlist down there for the first video if you haven't. And most importantly, enjoy your games and have a wonderful day. See you there and have a good one.